Well, this week, Media Watch returned, but our dear friend Paul Barry, who presented the show for 11 years, well, he was gone. Journalist Linton Besser is now at the helm. And joining me to discuss is a special guest, and you know him very well. It's Chris Kenny, the original host of this show, who has spent many years carefully watching and scrutinising the ABC. Chris, what did you make of the first media show with this new host?
Good to be back on the media show with you, Jack, and good that this show's in such great hands. But Media Watch this week, we've got our first clue that it wasn't going to be much different in the opening credits because they focused pretty heavily on Lachlan Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch. So you knew the Media Watch program was still going to be attacking or targeting News Corp pretty strongly. And they had a pretty lucky break, I think. Linton Besser, the new host, had a lucky break in that the Daily Telegraph had a big error on a big story. It was essentially a numerical error, one that was in the way that the numbers were treated by the computer, that inflated the number of visas given to people connected to others who have arrived here by boat by a factor of 10. Instead of 21,000 visas, in fact, there were only 2,100. So that was an embarrassing error, and it enabled Besser to sort of have a crack at the Daily Telegraph and all other media, including Sky News and others who went with those numbers. There was no reason that anyone should question them because they were allegedly sourced from a parliamentary document and they were repeated by the opposition. But in the end, that was clearly an accidental error that only changed the number, not the substance of the story. What Linton Besser didn't do was attack big ABC errors. Like, where is the ABC now on the Trump-Russia collusion stuff? They spent hours of television, radio time and millions of dollars running this Trump collusion nonsense that he was installed by Vladimir Putin the first time around, and yet they've never retracted that, never apologised for it. The ABC always was attacking Sharri Markson and others who suggested that the COVID-19 virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Their nonsense is still up online. They've never corrected or apologised for that. John Lyons for the ABC is constantly pushing out biased Hamas propaganda attacking Israel. No attempt to criticise that. Linton Besser, much more comfortable just smashing the Daily Telegraph over effectively what was a numerical error on a story that related to one of the big Achilles heels of the ABC, that is border protection. And I thought his little comment at the end really gave away what he thought. It just showed that he's part of the ABC groupthink that can't deal with secure borders, the protection of our maritime borders. Have a look.
Of course, there's nothing wrong with News Corp and the federal opposition gunning hard on border security. After all, it's worked for them in the past.
Yeah, well, Chris, it's very telling because he's making the argument that the very fact that it's immigration, there's almost this subtle hint that there is a reason, there's a business case for covering it. Not that Australians care about this issue, that's an important issue.
Exactly. It's as if border protection and talking about it is only ever a political issue. It's only about a political agenda. Failing to understand completely that you can't have a sovereign nation without secure borders. And more importantly, you can't have a rational, organised and popular immigration program unless people have faith in its integrity.
Now, there was one really interesting element of the show where he did attack one of his own fellow hosts at the ABC, and let's just have a listen to how he goes about doing that.
Chaz Licciardello hasn't just been using the ABC to produce and promote his own podcast because, get this, he's been flogging merchandise as well.
So we finally did it, guys. We finally have a merch store operating.
Woohoo! Yes, that's right. T-shirts for $35, hoodies for $50 and a cap for $30, all advertised via the ABC's Facebook page, where there's even been a useful link to the shop.
Now, it was brilliant to see him actually take aim at the ABC for what is an egregious breach of the Charter. You've got a host who's using the ABC platforms to sell merchandise. However, he found a way to make light of the issue, which is a very serious issue, and have a look at how he ended the show.
Right on point, Chaz. It's all a little bit shabby, isn't it? And frankly, we don't know how the ABC let you get away with it for so long. And that's all from us tonight.
Well, that to me was really interesting because instead of, if News Corp had done something like this on this level, which is, you know, essentially commercialising journalism. This is a blatant breach of the ABC Charter. This bloke should walk immediately. There should be massive repercussions for doing this. He turns into this little joke about how he's doing the same thing, and I thought it put a softener on what was otherwise a really strong segment.
Absolutely. It was a signal to the ABC, to Chaz Licciardo, who's one of the Chaser boys, who are now the Chaser middle-aged men, presumably. But it was a signal to him and everyone at the ABC up the chain that really this is a joking matter, that we're just going to laugh it off. It's not. He was commercialising not only his ABC program, but he was recording his podcasts in ABC studios. So this guy was basically making money courtesy of the public broadcaster. So it's a blatant breach. It requires a serious response. And you're absolutely right. Linton Besser let him off the hook with his joke at the end. The only thing I'd add to this is a favourite of the ABC. They'll criticise themselves for little commercial breaches because they really don't like anything that's commercial, I suppose, unless they're getting the benefits from it. But they still ignore the big issues. Where's the serious analysis of their absolutely biased coverage of the Israel-Hamas war, their anti-Israel stance? Go back to the Russian collusion stuff. They're absolutely incapable of any rational analysis of Donald Trump.
Gunshots. You know, you get a number wrong, right? And that's obviously an egregious mistake and shouldn't happen. Particularly, it was a tenfold error, which makes it even worse. But the ABC has just been exposed for deceptively editing in fake gunshots to make it look like someone was shooting at unarmed civilians. Doesn't even get a mention.
One's a big error, which is clearly an accident. The other is fabricating video and audio in order to frame our soldiers as war criminals. That's a much more egregious error, and they avoid those difficult topics.
I've got to admit, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but one of the things that the old host Paul Barry did, that it made the show almost unwatchable for me, and I think objectively huge improvement from the diversity of content. The show that Paul Barry ran was basically 15 minutes. You got 20 people to produce it at a huge expense to the taxpayer. 15 minutes playing grabs from Sky News that he doesn't like. Yes. That's what the show turned into. At least now he did spend considerable time pinpointing this commercial issue at the ABC. Now, whether he did it as hard as you and I maybe would like, I don't think we're ever going to get there.
Yeah.
But what do you make of that? And then we had the regional Australian feature as well about the death of the newsroom in Darwin.
That's a good story. Darwin losing its Channel 9 local news bulletin. I think everybody could agree that's a retrograde step. Look, there are signs of hope. One is he hasn't got that supercilious, condescending attitude of Paul Barry coming to us from this toffee British accent. So there's hope there that
it's also the smug grin that
the smugness. So he might not be as smug. And Paul Barry essentially, apart from targeting News Corp and Sky relentlessly, it was all about his ideology. It was about him trying to stop journalists from questioning renewable energy policies or climate alarmism, or stop them questioning the propaganda from Hamas. You know, he had his ideological guardrails and he's trying to keep everyone within them. It's too early yet with Linton Besser. Let's hope he's not like that, although the sign on border protection was telling. It's already he's
but
showing.
It was more subtle than Paul Barry would have done.
More subtle on week one.
It's probably just you and I picking it up. Chris Kenny, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be back, Jack.